Hello transport people and welcome back to the channel. First, a couple of words about the channel. It's been quite some time. I've moved out of my apartment into a new house and I've set up a new studio in here. So yeah, time kind of went by in the blink of an eye and suddenly it's 2021 and there hasn't been a video since summer sometime. Anyways, I love games like Transport Fever 2. I've played a lot of them, but Transport Fever 2, man, it's my favorite game. It's in my top 5. So even though I love the game, I love seeing my trains move around, building stuff, being creative, there's still a lot of things that I wish were a part of the game or that I think could make the game more fun, more appealing to new players and give it more replayability. So I've come up with a list of my wishes for the game, what I really wish was a part of it, and some things that I think would be cool, but yeah, let's just get to it. So the first thing I want to talk about is Globalism. And what do I mean by that? Well, the game supports big-ish maps and there's a lot of cities, a lot of industry, and you can custom make your maps and all of that, and that's great. But once you've connected all your cities and the industries and set up the lines you want, you're kind of done. It's kind of limited the way it is now, and the cities are kind of small. You can make them grow, of course, but unless you turn on sandbox mode and combine several cities, they end up like small towns, really. So I would really like to see international connections. And what do I mean by that? Well, imagine you connect your tracks to the edge of the map, or get to choose if you want to build an domestic or international airport, or you can have a harbor to connect to water that's connected to the sea or to water that is on the edge of the map. And you can start trading with the rest of the world. If you look to, for example, the Tropico series, you can start trading pretty much immediately and import goods to support your nation. Like, that's the point of the game. You have a logistics company. You want to get transport deals, and what better way to do that than start dealing with other countries around the world. So if you choose to connect your network to the edge of the map, you get an extra window where you can start trading with maybe 3 or 4 other companies from the outside world. So say you need lumber for your map. Maybe you have 2 lumber mills and one is way out in the bush, so you really don't want to use it. Or you have a lot of forest but only 1 lumber mill. You can choose to export your lumber and import planks, have someone else make them for you, and then you can ship that to your factories. Well, I think that would really help bring some more depth to the game, some more dynamic to the resource system of the game, and you can choose not to use it if you want to. You can maybe turn it off in options, but I don't see why that would be a possibility. You could just not connect your network and not build an international airport. Anyways, that would also open up the opportunity to have tourists be a part of the game. You already have an airport, you have a network, so why not have other people use it than your own? You can have guests come in from other countries. Maybe tourist attractions will be a new kind of building or a new kind of resource that is scattered around the map. Some ruins on top of a mountain, maybe an old war momentum or something like that, and tourists want to visit. So they come into your airport, they group up at your bus stations, and you have to have lines that go past the tourist attractions. Maybe even you can set up tourist round trips where you set a line, and the more cities and the more tourist attractions it visits within a time scale, the more kind of points you get for it, the more happy tourists will be to take your round trip or your sightseeing tour. That would be awesome. And maybe even your town can have a new zone for tourists where hotels will be, and you have to have specific stops there for routes that is popular with the tourists. And maybe even tourist resources will be a new thing you have to consider and make a part of your system. Maybe you want to craft souvenirs or food, fast food. Maybe tourists is more drawn to fast food, so they want that. And maybe even you have to deliver your tourist goods to the tourist attractions to make the happiness of the tourists go up. Obviously, happiness is not a thing in this game at this point, but I think a happiness system would really help kind of give a boost to all of these other systems that I'm going to propose in this video. And yeah, tourists is a part of that. Another thing with having your map be a part of a bigger global trading scene is you can have indirect competition. I know a lot of people want AI opponents in this this game, and we'll get back to that later in this video, but one way to add competition would be just having indirect competition through other companies in other countries that is not part of your map, but that will compete with you on price and push the prices up or make the market demand lower prices from you to be able to compete. And when we have goods that are being shipped globally and you import stuff, maybe we could have a storage facility. Maybe you want to build a warehouse for your goods so that you can have the production make a lot of product, and then your lines will all go to the storage and pick up what they need and then go to the cities. And yeah, just a thought. Anyways, let's move on. Next on the list is city development. Yeah, I love the cities in this game. They look great. But as I touched on earlier, they're kind of small. Like when you're in 2050 and your cities are no bigger than this, yeah, it kind of starts breaking the realism. And speaking of breaking immersion is also the big open spaces on the maps. Like you have green spaces and then you have small clusters of a city. Then you have a lot of green space and some trees, some forests, and then you have a cluster of houses again. What I really miss in this game is kind of rural housing or country houses and farm houses that are lived in, that have citizens that actually want to get to places. So if you have houses popping up on your country roads, or maybe small neighborhoods will grow out of your country roads, and yeah, then you'll have to consider setting up lines that go out and pick up the people that live out in the bush, that live out in the countryside. And one way to make this kind of more meaningful or to make it worth it for the player is to have workers that actually want to go to the factories. So let me tell you the story from when I first tried Train Fever. Way back when I first found the game, the very first thing I did was put a bus station in the town, put a bus station next to the factory outside of town, and put a bus station next to the resource facility outside of town. And I put up a line that went from the town to the factory to the resource facility and started the game and sat there eagerly waiting my route to be successful. And of course, no one wanted to take that bus because no one actually worked at the factories. So I sat there with the game running for a while, and eventually I had to give up. I had to quit the game, Google how to start a new game in Train Fever that was, and quickly I realized that passenger lines are just for within city or city to city travel. So yeah, it really makes sense for me that people want to go to the factories. Like, the game is about transportation. You want to transport people to where they work, where they want to go. And I thought it was obvious that workers wanted to go to the big factory outside of town. So why not? Maybe the factories can have a efficiency stat, or I guess they kind of have an efficiency stat already, but workers should really be a part of that. Like, if you bring a lot of workers to the factory, the efficiency goes up. And to get the efficiency to be as good as possible, you have to bring every person that works there to the factory, and then you have to have a transportation option for them. And speaking of the factories, how it is now, you start the game and the cities are already there. But what if, when you place down a factory, small houses pop up around that factory, and when you satisfy the needs of the people living near the factory and the factory itself, the settlement grows. And when the factory upgrades, the city grows even more. I'm no historian, but I really think that is how it works in the real world. When there's jobs, people migrate to it. So how I see the cities growing is you place down factories, or the game maybe plays down some factories for you, and then the city grows around it. And for some factories, maybe the city grows nearby it. It doesn't have to like surround the factory. And if you don't want a city there, you can just ignore it. Just want it to remain a small settlement or a small town, maybe a village. Then you don't satisfy the citizens' needs, and they will just stay like that. And maybe the game will place some cities around the map like it does now, and then you can choose to have more cities by bringing stuff to the factories. And this will help in the realism aspect of the game as well, because a lot of production in the real world happens in towns, and especially in the later eras, more digital goods and more digital jobs are created, so maybe more production will happen in the city. So the industrial and commercial zones in the city, maybe they start producing products as well. You'll not only need trucks to go out and deliver resources to the zones in the town, you also need trucks to pick up what they make and bring back to your station or your a goods hub. That also give more depth to the transportation planning in the city and make you want to have more lines throughout your city, which is a good thing in my opinion. And maybe this will kind of kick into high gear later in the game, so that the difficulty in the late game will kind of be greater, or the gameplay will kind of gradually change as time goes by. So you have to start changing up your routes and planning new lines, maybe close down some of your old lines because they're no longer relevant. Maybe some factories out there on the countryside will close down as time goes on, and then production will be moved into the city. So, difficulty. Some people think that this game is a breeze. It's a sandbox. You can do whatever you want. As soon as you have a couple of successful lines, you got all the money you need. And some people struggle, especially on hard mode. So, the way the game works now is... the game is kind of bare bones when it comes to difficulty. Like, there's not many ways to tweak the difficulty other than adjusting the balance of the elements that's already there. The income, the costs of vehicles and buildings, and your starting cash. So how can we make difficulty more kind of dynamic and more, just give the game more depth and more different stuff to think about? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is disasters and emergency. Maybe your trains will burst into flames, or they will derail from time to time. Maybe we can introduce a maintenance stat, which, that's already part of the game, but if you neglect the maintenance, maybe they will break down, or maybe your tracks will break down and your trains will derail as a result of you down prioritizing maintenance. I think disasters would be really fun if they were introduced. Like, your trains can crash. Like, you have a block system, and of course the train can't move forward when there's a train on the next block, but in the real world, trains are driven by people, and people make mistakes. Maybe the train driver took a sip of coffee and didn't notice the signal, or maybe he fell asleep, who knows. But if the trains collide from time to time, or they break down, or maybe your trucks break down, or get in a collision, or maybe Godzilla would turn up and the game would turn into SimCity. But either way, I think disasters and emergency and maintenance could really help bring depth to the game. Maybe your depots will have a maintenance crew, and you have to upgrade the maintenance crew or maintain it to have them go out and fix your trains and fix your tracks, fix your vehicles, and fix your buildings up. And that would also help make the depots have more meaning, because how it is now, you can place a depot and you can put a train out and you can delete the depot and you will have the train on the tracks forever and ever. And if you want a new train, you can just bling, change it by magic. So depots need more meaning, and having maintenance be a part of it would be a great way to do that. And if your vehicles break down, you'll have to wait for the maintenance crew to move out and fix them, and your other lines that use the same piece of track will be delayed, and it would just make the game more interesting. Because how it is now, you just put up your system, and as long as you plan your signals correctly, everything will just work forever, and you can just sit back and watch it all do its thing. And you could also do that with disasters on, but sometimes things will just stop and you'll have to wait for the maintenance crew to fix it, and then you'd lose money. If you have too few depots and your crew have to move across the whole map to fix a train, then you'll start losing money quick. Another way to bring the difficulty up would be to have some kind of a political system to the game. Not a deep system, it doesn't have to be, but maybe each town has its own local government that puts some rules into place, like you can't delete more than 10 houses, or you have to keep 10% of green space if you want to place a station in the city. Or maybe they will forbid trains and you can only use trucks in that city, and if you want trains, you have to put the station outside the city and have a bus route go in, pick up people. There's a lot of ways you can go about it, but I think having the citizens of a game have their own opinions about the things you do really helps bring depth to the game as well. Like, you can look to Tropico again, there the politics are a big part of the game, and it doesn't need to be that big of a part, but maybe, like I said, have some rules in place for the cities and maybe some rules for the whole map, and maybe you'll have to take some decisions now and then, kind of you get an ultimatum from the mayor of a city or something like that, and you have to take a choice, and the choice will last out the game, or maybe last 10 years or something like that. And maybe if you do what the politicians want, they will kind of bring a boost to your transport system. Maybe you get a 10% boost in passengers in that town because you made them happy, and they're saying great things about you in their speeches or something like that. The last thing on my difficulty list is just how the trains turn around. How it is now, they just flip around if they can't drive backwards, and it doesn't look good. Breaks immersion for some people. You get used to it, of course, but the first time I saw it, I kind of went, what? So, having the train drive out of the station to a turntable and then flip it around to make it go back. Yeah, if you want the loco to detach from the wagons and go into the turntable, flip around, go back past the wagons and then connect to them on the other side, that would be a lot of programming and also a lot of planning for the player to do, and maybe it would put some new players off. If you want a system like that, you should also have the option to make steam trains and every kind of train actually go backwards like they do in the real world. When they can't flip around, they just back all the way to the other side of the line again. But you could solve it by just having the wagons despawn and have the train go into the turntable, flip it around, and when it comes back out, it has the wagons spawn again on the other side. I know that's kind of like having it flip around right away, but at least it makes the game somewhat more difficult, and maybe you'll have the option to upgrade your turntables or make them modern. If you're stuck with a turntable from the 1850s, then they will be really slow to flip the train around, and if you upgrade them, they will flip around quicker. And also, if you have a lot of trains in the same station, you have a big station, they have to queue to turn around, and it will affect the efficiency of the routes. You can also have the option then, of course, to just make a loop, the track go out of the station and then loop around to the station again, and that would also save you some time if you want to go through the trouble of making a loop. So yeah, it makes the game more dynamic, and that's a good thing. So let's talk about time. I know a lot of people has meanings about time in this game. I would really love seasons. This game is beautiful, but I need snow around my steam trains. Nothing screams Christmas to me like steam trains plowing through the snow. Like ever since I first found Train Fever, first heard of it and got it for myself, I've been playing this game every December. And in Train Fever and Transport Fever 1, there was good snow mods on the workshop. In this game, they introduced the snow brush, so you can make the ground white, but the trees are green as a summer day, and the streets are just bare of snow, so it doesn't really look right to me, and no snow on the houses, on the roofs or anything. But yeah, seasons would be, oh, it would be so good. How it is now, it's the same kind of light throughout the whole playthrough. I know we can change the light with mods, but I want it to be dynamic. I want it to change to rain. I want autumn and spring. Like when it rains, it doesn't affect the efficiency of your lines that much, but maybe they will have a bigger maintenance need because they're wet and they rust. And when it snows, maybe you'll have to put a plow on your trains. Maybe you can even have an upgrade system for the train, so you can buy plows and more storage for coal and stuff like that. And yeah, I forgot to mention that, but when I was talking about maintenance, maybe your trains have to be maintained by having their tanks refilled with water and having their coal storage filled up. And you can upgrade the storage, and you can upgrade it with a plow, and if the train doesn't have a plow, it has to wait in the station until a train with a plow has gone ahead before it, and then it can go. It brings a lot of opportunity for the gameplay as well, but just for the looks of it, I would really love seasons. And that of course brings me to day and night cycle. Of course, I would love a day and night cycle. Yeah, sure, playing at night would be not as fun because you can't see as much, and when it's night number 200 in your playthrough, maybe you're sick of watching your trains in the dark, but there's ways around it. Maybe you can turn on an option for skip nights, maybe like they do in Planet Coaster. Like the clock goes to 12 o'clock until it's pitch dark, and then it just skips to 6 o'clock when the sun starts to rise again. And or maybe you can just have a custom skip period, like if you want to skip from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. you can choose that in the time settings. There's ways to do this, and it wouldn't affect the time system that's in the game per now, because the days could just go by separately to the seasons or the day and night cycle, so they don't interfere with each other at all. Or maybe you can just make a system where a day is 5 in-game days and the night is 2 in-game days, 3 in-game days, or 5 in-game days, and that way the days can move past fast as they do now, so that you don't have to wait 150 years to get to the modern age, and you can still experience nights and days and winters and all of that good stuff. So, the big thing that I've seen time and time again that people want, like I've done some reading, and every time I'm on the forums or look at comments on the developer updates or on the, people want a timetable in this game. And of course it works in other games, so people are used to it, but for me personally, I don't need it, and here's why. Of course, I really want the game to have more depth, and the way it works now, you just set it up and it goes on by itself, and it's not really that much to it. But I think you can solve solve a lot of you can scratch a lot of the planning itch that the players have by just introducing two things: priority lines and dynamic lines. Priority lines would be what you also call express services. When you put up the line, you can have maybe an option, for example, where you choose full load, all, or any. You can have a button to activate priority on that line. Then that line would have priority at signals and at crossings over the other lines. And maybe you even can have 3 different levels of priority: one low priority, one normal priority, and one high priority. And the high priority, maybe the train looks 3 blocks ahead, or maybe just a set length in front of it, or something like that. Say if you have a crossing and you have 5 signals on each line, and a small passenger train moves towards the crossing and is 1 signal until it's at the crossing, and an express train is moving up from another line and has 3 signals to the crossing. Because the express train kind of locks down 3 blocks ahead, the passenger train would stop for the express train, even though the passenger train is closer to the crossing. So that's one way to do it. If you have a set amount of length in front of it, of course that would also work. Like a normal train has 100-meter blocking length in front of it, and express train maybe have 1 kilometer or something like that. So that will really help making the express trains have more meaning. And this would also be a great way to make sidings work. If a low priority train is driving in front of a high priority train, it would choose to go into the siding and stop at the signal and let the high priority train pass. How it is now, if you have several lines using one piece of track, you always want to make sure that the trains have the same top speed, or else you're bound to have a situation where the fast train has to move and stop because it's behind a slower train. So that would be a really good way to have sidings work in this game, to have the priority setting affect slower trains and make planning your lines a lot more fun. And the other thing is dynamic lines. If you have a station with 5 platforms and you're building a line, you put a stop there and you make it dynamic, then the train, when it's moving up to the signal before the station, it will look to the platform to see if it's free, and if it's not free, then it will move on to the next platform, and that way the trains will move into the platform you've set in the line if it's free, but if it's not free, then it will just pick another platform. And yeah, that will make the lines feel more realistic and make the stations more effective, and planning out the approach to the stations a lot more fun. So if you have those two, I don't think you need a timetable. Of course, it would be really great to have a timetable, but the way that this game works now, it will be a lot of programming and a lot of work to have a timetable work, and it would lead to a lot of micromanaging and maybe put some players off, like players that just want to build and create and watch their trains drive around. Yeah, there's a lot of ways you can do this, but if you have priority lines and dynamic lines, I think you've made a lot of players happy just by having those two options. And if your train has to wait on, say, 3 express trains at a crossing and it gets delayed, maybe you can introduce late fees. If it uses a minute more than it usually does, or the frequency, if the frequency on the line is 90 seconds and the train uses 1 minute and 50 seconds, maybe you'll get hit with a late fee and you'll earn 25% less on that trip. So, let's talk about multiplayer and opponent AIs. A lot of people want multiplayer as well. I've seen it in interviews and on forums, and yeah. Personally, I don't care about multiplayer in this game. There's not a single friend of mine that is into this game, so yeah, I don't have a need to play this in multiplayer. But of course, I understand that multiplayer would be fun, and for a lot of people, cooperating and building stuff together will bring a lot to this game, I suppose. But for me personally, I don't. I just look at this as a single player game where I build my own company and plan things the way I want it to be. So multiplayer doesn't really appeal to me. But to have multiplayer work in a game like this, that would take a lot of programming, a lot of changing up of the code of the game, I suppose. I'm no programmer, but I really don't hope that they use a lot of time to make a multiplayer thing in this game. I would much more appreciate them fixing up the things that are in the game per now and adding new gameplay tweaks and new elements to the game, like all the things I talk about in this video. But when it comes to opponent AIs, yeah, that would be cool, and that would bring a lot to this game as well. It would just affect how this game plays. Of course, you have to start competing on prize and seizing land before your opponents it does, but let's be real here, people. You all know how finicky the building system is in this game. Like, imagine an AI trying to place tracks or trying to place a station in a city. It would be a disaster, and it would look awful if it were to work. Like, it would calculate where to build tracks, and it would have terrain alignment collisions and all sorts of things, and it would just look horrendous. Of course, it can be done, but you'll have to have a really smart and sophisticated AI to be able to use the systems in this game. Yeah, the building is great in this game, but it can be really finicky and will fight you. So yeah, I would really love an AI opponent in this game, but they have to rework the entire game to have that work, I think. But as I said, I'm no programmer, so what do I know? One way to have multiplayer a part of this game is to have a kind of a scoreboard system where you play the game as a single player game, but you have maps put out by the community or by the dev team, and you can post your progress there, and maybe it keeps track of your company, and there's a scoreboard where you can see how you rank against other players. That would be fun, and that would also kind of push people towards making as efficient networks as possible. Of course, it would not be fun for people like me who likes to take my time and build things that I enjoy and think are beautiful. That wouldn't really work with having a high score unless the game starts tracking beauty and stuff like that, but that's also a really hard thing to make right, because you can just plop trees everywhere and have a high beauty score Planet Coaster. But yeah, that's a possibility and might be the easiest way to have competition introduced to the game. So that's basically my list. I just have one more thing that I just couldn't kind of fit into any of the big topics that I've talked about, and that is in fact beauty. Like, there's a lot of people that take public transport not to get to somewhere, but for the trip itself, and that is a really great way to experience nature and landscape and culture. So wouldn't it be great if you could have a beauty setting per line or per train? Like, if you build a line that goes by the coasts, and you can have kind of a field of view around the train, maybe a circle that the train emits, and if you place trees and fields and make the line go close to water and make the line cross bridges, the beauty score of the line would go up, and you can get a boost in passengers by having a beautiful line. How it is now, you get the most money by just having the line go as straight as possible, as fast as possible, and as long as possible before it drops off. But by introducing a beauty stat, you get points by having the line kind of wind through the terrain and go over bridges, and maybe you get a penalty by having the line go into tunnels. Like, for each 100 meters of tunnel you get -1%, I don't know, and for each 100 meters of bridge you cross you get +1% or something like that. And that would really help push people towards building beautiful lines, dressing them up, and maybe you can unlock monuments, and the tourist thing would really benefit from this, as tourists would be drawn towards lines with a high beauty stat. Yeah, that's a good idea if I have to say so myself. And that's all I had, people. So what do you think about my suggestions? Do you agree? Do you think these are good suggestions, or do you have some better yourself? Or am I just rambling on about things you don't care about at all? And I didn't want to call this video What I Want for Transport Fever 3, because I think Transport Fever 2 is great as it is, and a great foundation to build upon. And a lot of the things I've listed in this video I do think can be implemented into this game as it is now. And of course, I'm really grateful that we have this game at all, and I love the game and Urban Games and their commitment to make this game as great as it can be and into what we want, and of course into their vision as well. Even though I don't appreciate the simplifications they've done to the game by having vehicles magically appear into newer vehicles when you buy new ones, I'd much rather make the vehicles go back to the depot and have new vehicles come out of the depot like they did in the previous game. But that's just me. Make the game as realistic as possible. I don't care about gameplay and fun. I find a lot of fun in realism. So yeah, that's just me. I realized that this video is kind of all over the place, but thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, and subscribe if you want, and like if you like, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!